Okay, so the class is being recorded, and this is me, Dr. Sameh, and this is A230A. We're starting the second semester. We meet, of course, on Sunday, every Sunday at 10 a.m. Um, Again, it's 2025, 2026, the second semester, and the course that we're doing is A230A. A230A is an interesting course, interesting in the sense that it covers huge terrains. It takes you, its trajectory is very long. It takes you all the way from perhaps the Middle Ages until the early 19th century. Again, we're covering time periods when we're covering a bit of history, a bit of culture, and of course, literature. We have a tapestry of genres. I think by now, coming that far, I think you know what a genre is. Genre is a type of literature. When we talk about a play, this is a genre. When we say a novel, this is another genre. When you say a short story, this is a third. Poetry is a genre in and of itself. These are different genres, and we're covering some of them. We're starting off with plays or drama, but we're not ending there. After drama, we will have narrative, that it's going to be a short narrative, a novella, and then we move on to tackle poetry, and then we end up with a novel, a full-fledged novel, Frankenstein. So this is the trajectory of the course. We're starting off as early as the Middle Ages. But of course, we're not going to cover the Middle Ages, very intensively and extensively. We're going to set the Middle Ages against the other times. We're going to compare it to the other times in order to highlight how different those other time periods are. Again, A230A is similar to a course that you have taken. And I gather that you guys, if you have come that far, it means that you have covered EL 121N sometime. I think it has N to it, the letter N to it. So, which is critical appreciation, I think. Um, EL 121 was meant to kind of introduce you to the different genres. Of course, the dwelling and the treatment is going to be more profound and deeper when it comes to A230A. But at least you have some foundation and some knowledge that we can build on. I think by now you know what a novel is. And let me ask you this quick question before we proceed. Um, what's the difference, if any? Let's agree on the different genres, and let's talk about what distinguishes them from each other. When I say a play, when I say a poem, when I say a novel, what's the difference, if any? Are they the same? Are they different? And if they are different, how different they are? What makes them different? What makes a play or drama different from a novel, for example? Let's talk about it. Any ideas?
I think the uh, play it for audience. You have to
Okay.
have an audience.
Okay. So you mean live audience? I mean, people
Yes,
go to the theater
theater.
in
Yes,
order to watch and see a performance that we call a play or drama, right?
yes,
But we're not doing it this way. Now, obviously, this is not the only difference because we're reading those plays and we're studying them, right? So perhaps there are other things that would distinguish a play from a non-play. What else? We're talking about the difference between a play and a novel, for example. A play and a poem, for example. Any other insights?
Maybe the way of writing.
Okay, so the way of writing, yes, how?
Um, the poem need to have rhythm and rhyme. The play don't need to have this, need to have like climax and stuff like that.
That's these are very interesting distinctions. The fact that poetry is for the most part metrical and rhythmic. The fact that you have music coming out of it, yeah, that's true. Which is something that you may not find in plays. Although there are plays that we call verse dramas, where there is also poetry, but this is not the mainstream. The mainstream in plays is prose. They are prose. They are not poetic. Yes. Um, Again, yeah, like you said, I mean, when we talk about climax, when we talk about the plot, obviously, this is a distinction between a poem and a play. Although we also in poetry, we have this kind of poetry that we refer to as epic poetry, where we also have a plot and we have climatic situations and everything in between. Um, Again, let's go back to the idea that you go and watch a performance. Yeah, that's interesting. This is a very interesting distinction, like Abdurrahman is saying. Plays are built on dialogues and conversations. So it's the I, we, and you pronouns that we're using. So people are talking to each other. People are not reporting like we see in novels. In novels, you have people reporting about other people, narrating, telling a story. But in plays, you have this. Not really. I mean, it's not. Abdullah is saying that they are short written scenarios. I mean, plays can be long and can be big, and they can take it. It depends on what kind of plays they are. Again, the one single distinction that I can think of when it comes to plays would be the idea of conversations and dialogues. It's something that we see in novels because novels obviously have everything, but the stress on dialogues is the hallmark of plays. So you cannot imagine a play without a dialogue or a conversation. So this is one of the distinctions. Um, okay, so if we move to novels, what distinguishes novels from non-novels would be the idea of narration, the fact that you have narrative. Narrative means that you have somebody who is telling or retelling or narrating a story. Um, okay. Poetry, like we said, we're not talking about narrative, and we're not talking about dialogues. We're talking about perhaps the poet or the persona of the poet addressing us, perhaps addressing himself, addressing the world in a musical language that has meter, language that has rhythm, language that has, figures of speech and all those kinds of things. So let me ask you about your preferences. If we have to choose between those different genres, which of them would you like us to only teach? If you have to choose between these three or four genres, plays, poetry, novels, and what else? Short stories. Which of them is your favorite? None? Mhm.
For me, it's play.
Yeah, you like plays.
Yeah.
Nice. Any specific reason? Sometimes people don't have reasons for their preferences, but if you have one, that would be not fine.
Uh,
Any reasons why you, of all the different genres, you like plays? Yeah, Taylor, right?
yes,
Mm-hmm.
because I study plays in some course at university, and I love it so much. I love
Mm-hmm.
studying it and everything
Nice.
about it.
MashaAllah. That's interesting. Yeah, yeah. Good. Okay, other people. We're talking about your preferences. We're not asking a test question. I mean, we're testing your preferences, if you like. You also like plays like Tala or perhaps novels, short stories, poetry. The Rahman is saying novels because it has more freedom for authors and it is more complex backstories. Yeah, that's yeah, very interesting. Yeah, novels are also. What is interesting, perhaps, about novels is the fact that they have all the other genres in them. If you want dialogues, you have dialogues in novels. If you have narration, of course, there is narration. If you have poetry, yeah, you may have one of the characters reciting or writing poetry. That's fine. So, novel is a monster in the description of one critic's monster in terms of how gigantic and how big it is if you compare it to other to the other genres, of course. Yes. Okay. طيب. Let's now focus on what we have ahead. And what we have ahead is, um, discussions and debates that cuts across different time periods. Again, we're starting off with the medieval period. We're not going to dwell heavily on that period, I promise you. But again, this is going to be perhaps one of the benchmarks. It's going to be a yardstick that will measure the achievements of the upcoming generations against. And then we'll move on to the Renaissance, and we'll talk about the Renaissance, and then we move on to the 17th century, which is obviously more or less part of the Renaissance, and then the 18th century, the Age of Reason, and then we move on to the 19th century. The early 19th century is all about the Romantics and Romanticism, and this is where we're stopping, inshallah. Okay. Again, let me also lay out our philosophy in teaching the course because we have different schools when it comes to teaching literature. You have the traditional school of teaching literature that places a huge premium on the background of the age. The background of the age, the socioeconomic forces and the cultural milieu are very important, and they make or break in when it comes to our full understanding and subsequent appreciation of the work. So this is the school that focuses on themes and ideas and ideologies. And this is the school that we're adopting and following. And you have another school which focuses on the form, which focuses on what makes a novel a novel, what makes a play a play. And they normally say that it's not about the theme or the ideas, because the themes and the ideas can be expressed in these different genres. And there wouldn't be any difference. The real distinction would be with the form, how a play is written, how a poem is constructed, and so on. So this is, or perhaps with this, we focus on the formal aspects of the work. We focus, if we talk about poetry, we focus on the rhyme, the rhythm, the imagery, and then comes the theme and the idea, and everything in between. Again, we're saying that we're, kind of moving between the two approaches, but perhaps, to be honest, the thematic biographical approach is more dominant here, where in order to fully understand and appreciate a piece of work, we need to read about the age in terms of culture, in terms of the philosophy, in terms of the political system, and everything in between. So this is what we're following, and that's why every time period, of course, it has its representative plays or novels or poems. But before we start the poem, or before we start to address a play, we need to read about the age. We need to study the age and examine its different aspects, political, cultural, religious, and so on. And this is exactly what we're doing. Again, the only period that does not have representation in the course is the medieval times, or the Middle Ages, otherwise known as the Dark Ages. The Dark Ages, we're talking about the period, um, perhaps, of course, we're not going that far, but we're talking about the period from perhaps the 6th century to the 12th or the 13th century. This is um, called the Dark Ages because Europe at the time was not advanced, and because people were not educated, there was no science to speak of, there was no governance, real governance. So it was a feudal system where you have the feudal lord, and um, you have a few who own the land, you have the majority who work the land for those few, and they receive very little, they earn very little. So in a system like that, you don't expect creativity. People don't have time to be creative, to write things. Um, so this is normally called the Middle Ages, or the Dark Ages. And we call them Dark Ages, like I said, because of the very high level of illiteracy. People were uneducated, and the church at the time was all in all. The church was manipulating everything. Church leaders were governing and ruling, and again, everything was measured and assessed against religious principles. Um, and there was no room for science or advancement, like I said. So it's only natural that in times like those, you don't expect flourishing, you don't expect advancement in science, in medicine, You only expect everything to be interpreted from the standpoint of religion. And there is obviously nothing wrong with that, but to interpret everything in terms of religion would be losing sight of other aspects of life. Again, what kind of literature did we have during the Middle Ages? We had very little literature, literature that we wouldn't call literature in our modern sense, but it was literature all the same. When we talk about literature, we talk about drama as being, of course, there were poetry and everything, but drama was there because it served a religious purpose. Dramas were staged so that people can go to those, humble uh, theater houses in order to see people acting and performing. And when they come back, they think of what they have watched, and what they have watched was primarily religious themes and ideas. You need to remember that during the Middle Ages, people were not educated. So, in order to tell them about religion, in order to teach them how to behave in an upright way, how to behave in a religious way, how to be honest, uh, um, how to treat other people good, how not to steal. You cannot write books because books, I mean, this was a time when the printing press was not invented yet. So, writing a book or creating or publishing a book was a big deal. It's something that nobody could afford. So, and again, you don't have so many writers because people were for the most part uneducated. So the solution is, in order to teach people how to behave in a proper way, you need to uh, dramatize things. You need to create simple plays, and those simple plays had moral lessons. They were didactic. Didactic means that they uh, teach people how to be virtuous, how to avoid uh, sin, how to behave in a Christian, in a good Christian way. The two kinds of plays that were very prominent during the time were morality plays or the morality plays and the mystery plays. So morality plays, from the name and from the phrase, you can almost tell that those plays were all about morality, teaching you to be virtuous and teaching you to avoid vice and sin. Um, Morality plays, and those morality plays were very simplistic in the treatment of the subjects that they addressed. You have characters who are all flat. They are symbolic of the different virtues and vices. You have a character representing goodness, you have another representing vice, you have a third representing greed, and those different characters act and react. And there is a fight normally between virtue and vice, between whatever is good and whatever is bad, and obviously the good forces win at the end. And this is obviously a moral lesson. These were the morality plays, and one good example of that is a play by the name of Every Man. You have mystery plays which were not very different, except for the fact that they were uh, perhaps funded and sponsored by the guilds, the professional associations at the time, and they were also promoting uh, virtue, promoting good behavior and upright manners. So this was the Middle Ages. As you can see, that was a time that was very simple and that was very, basic in terms of development. There was no development or progress to speak of. And then when we come to the perhaps the late 12th century and early 13th century, people are going to start to question this kind of atmosphere, this kind of life. They will start to challenge those orthodoxies when it comes to religion, when it comes to avoiding science and progress. They start to say, listen, we have given the church enough time, we have given uh, the religious interpretation of things enough chances, and it's about time that we pursue other uh, uh, things like we need to promote the love of science, we need to promote the love of uh, scientific discoveries, we need to go beyond our borders and explore cultures and people in other continents. And this is how it all started. And not surprisingly, it started in Italy. And the reason why Italy was the point of departure here is that Italy, as you know, is made up of, at the time, it wasn't one country or one state, it was a number of states, and some of those states were trading empires. When you have a trading empire, it means that you're reaching out to other empires in the world. So people of Italy were more open and were more ready than anybody else in Europe to go beyond their borders and to trade with other cultures. When you trade with other cultures, when you reach out to other people from other religions, from other races, you develop tolerance, of course, you develop um, understanding. You also uh, get influenced and affected by them. If they do something nice, if they have levels of civilizations that you haven't reached, you may imitate and copy them. And this is exactly what Italy did, especially with the Arabs. Arabs and Muslims were uh, um, big in terms of science and knowledge. I mean, there were also the Chinese. So the Italians had those long trips to the Arab world, to the Muslim world, to China. And I'm sure you're familiar with people like Marco Polo, this Italian uh, voyager and explorer who went all the way to China, and he spent years upon years there. And when he came back to Italy, he started to tell people about what he had seen and what he did. Obviously, he imported lots of the civilization that he has seen over there. So Italy again was a trading empire. They had money because of the trading and transactions that they did with other nations and other continents. They were very rich. And being rich allowed the rulers to sponsor the arts. So the rulers started to develop taste for the fine arts, for literature, and they started to encourage artists and poets and literary figures to write and create. Again, they started to do that. And it is also in Italy and in other parts of Europe that people started to say, obviously, it wouldn't be enough to depend on the learning that we have gained from the people in the Middle Ages because it was very little and it was all uh, uh, religiously oriented. Everything was interpreted in terms of religion. So they said, no, we need an inspiration from somewhere else. So they started to go all the way back to the time before Christianity. They went all the way back to the Greeks and the Romans before Christianity. Those times were great times in terms of learning, in terms of civilization, and the flourishing of science. This was the time when philosophy flourished, when physical and natural science flourished. And I'm sure you're familiar with people like Plato, Aristotle. You have done that in A100A. So Plato and Aristotle and Socrates belong to those times. Those were great figures that belonged to the Greeks before the Middle Ages, before Christianity came. Um, so they, so the Europeans started to think to go all the way back, to skip the Middle Ages and go all the way back to the Greeks and to the Romans after them. They started to learn from them. They started to translate their work, and whether it's philosophy, whether it's natural science, whether it's the other, kinds of learning, and they started to get inspired by them, and that was very successful because they started to develop a different mindset, secular mindset, if you like, where the focus was on nature, the outside nature, the laws of nature. Um, Going back to the time before Christianity and before the Middle Ages is called the trend and the movement is now called Renaissance. And if you know French and Latin, you know that Renaissance means rebirth, revival. So, what is it that they were reviving, and what is it that they were uh, giving a lease of life to? It was classical learning, the learning of the Greeks and the Romans. So this is what we call the Renaissance. So Renaissance was a movement that started in Italy in the 13th century, but obviously it didn't stop there. It started to spread across Europe, and the basic idea of the Renaissance would be to go all the way back to the Greeks and the Romans for learning, for inspiration, for uh, the natural science. They got the inspiration that they needed and they started to build on it. And we started to have um, an enlightened Europe, a Europe that is totally different from the Europe that we're familiar with in the Middle Ages. We started to have Europeans moving beyond their borders, exploring other nations and continents like Africa, like South Asia, Indian, and the subcontinent, China, like I said. So and when you have those cultural encounters with people from other races and from other nations, you get to learn a bit from them. And this is how civilizations are built. So during the Renaissance, which, like I said, started perhaps in the 13th century and extended to perhaps the 17th or the 18th century, you had flourishing of science, scientific progress, good governance. The church is not ruling anymore. There is a state, there is a government, there is a hierarchy of a sort where you have perhaps the king or the queen on top, and then you have the ministers, you have the nobles, and then you have common people, and then you have the low classes. So this was a hierarchy that is perhaps inherited from the Middle Ages, but people at the Renaissance found it also useful to follow that kind of order. So this is the journey that we are on. We're moving from the Middle Ages with its ignorance and decadence and illiteracy to the Renaissance with its enlightenment, with its advancement, with its geographical discoveries and flourishing. Um, and of course, like we said, um, what triggered all of that is the classical learning that the Europeans started to discover and take from. They went or they skipped the Middle Ages and went all the way back to the ancient Greeks and the ancient Romans. And they started to read their literature, they started to read their physics, their chemistry, their different sciences, their philosophy, of course, and they started to build on that and develop scientific theories. They started to develop mathematics, and they started to even uh, um, think of good governance and what makes a good, ruler, and all those kinds of things. Like I said, it all started in Europe, in Italy, but obviously it extended beyond Europe and it went to other parts of Europe. We're focused perhaps more on England, and we're focused perhaps more on the Elizabethan uh, and the Jacobean age. The Elizabethan age is the time when Queen Elizabeth I was um, um, ruling, and she was also an educated monarch or queen. She encouraged artists and writers, and during her time, there were lots of progress and development in all the aspects of life including literature. So this is the time that we normally refer to as the Elizabethan age. So the Elizabethan age is part of the Renaissance. It goes under the Renaissance, and it was inspired by what we said about the Renaissance in terms of learning and development and everything in between. Um, let's perhaps focus on the Elizabethan age. Let's perhaps focus on two aspects of the Elizabethan age. We'll focus on uh, the the kind of government and the time and the kind of system of governance that was there and whether it was inspired by, you know, other ideas, cosmic, perhaps universal, and we'll also look at the kind of literature that was prominent during the time. So when you look at the Elizabethan age, you're going to see that during the time, people used to believe in the idea of the chain of being, the fact that everything in life has a hierarchy or a set of levels, and levels and people, the whole universe is arranged in a certain symmetrical way where you normally have a top and then you go down until you go to the bottom. On top, you have a number of hierarchies. One of those hierarchies is the what we call chain of being, where you have God on top of this chain of being, and then you have the angels, and then you have the archangels, and then you have human beings in the middle, and then you have animals down to stones and dust at the bottom. So this is the cosmic hierarchy, and it was reinforced, of course, by religion. So everybody believes in this hierarchy, and then you have corresponding microcosmic cosmic hierarchies. When we talk, for example, about the state or a country, you would have on top of the hierarchy the king or the queen, and then you have perhaps the princes, the ministers, and then you have people, middle class people, and then you have at the end or at the bottom, you have uh, low class people, the poor, for example. This is another hierarchy. And then you have also a corresponding hierarchies. If you talk in terms of international relationship, you talk about a hierarchy of races where white people are on top of the hierarchy, and then you have perhaps yellow people in the middle, and then you have black people at the bottom. This is a hierarchy of race or a hierarchy of color. Again, those corresponding hierarchies are established, which means that they are part of a cosmic order that you shouldn't challenge. So, what happens if you try to challenge this arrangement and this order? Let's let's talk about the biggest hierarchy of them all, which is the chain of being, where you have God on top, and then you have the angels and the archangels, and then human beings, and then at the bottom you would have dust and stone and everything in between. So, what do you think? If as a human being, if as a human being, I am trying to challenge this hierarchy and I want to go a step up, I am, according to the chain of being, I, as a human being, has um, a position in the middle. But I'm not happy with this position. I am ambitious enough and I want to go and perhaps compete with um, angels or archangels. Perhaps I want to compete with God. Is that possible? I'm asking you.
Yes, I think, yeah.
No, it's not possible. Look
Wow.
at we're talking about a hierarchy that has God on top, and then you have the angels, and then you have human beings in the middle. So, can human beings, my question again, can human beings assume the role of God? Can they be, I mean, there is obviously only one God, right?
Yes.
So, you cannot
Yes.
go up, right?
Ah,
This is
yes.
this is disrupting the chain. This is causing problems, obviously. And you have taken something like that if you have done Dr. Faustus, for example. Still remember, have you taken Dr. Faustus in A to
Yes,
30A?
yes.
Yes.
So what was wrong with Dr. Faustus was
He made
that
a
he
deal with the
wanted,
devil.
yeah, what did he want? I mean, he was not obviously happy with his station in life. He was a scientist, he was a philosopher, he had everything, but he was not happy. He wanted to be, what did he want to do? He
He,
wanted to
he
raise
want
the
to get
dead.
more.
Yeah, he wanted to raise the dead. Yeah, people who died, he wanted to bring them back to. Who is able to do that?
Only God.
Only
Only
God
God.
to able
So
to
if,
be resurrect people. Yeah.
right? So if you're trying to have those powers, it means that you are trying to act like another God. Is that acceptable?
No.
No.
Would he get away with it?
No.
No. Remember what happened to him at the end?
Yes.
He was
He
thrown
was.
into hellfire.
Yeah. He was. Yeah.
This is obviously a punishment, right? Because you shouldn't overstep. Let's talk on another level. If we have a kingdom where we have, of course, a king or a queen, and then you have princes, you have ministers, and you have middle class people. You have, and let's assume that I'm one of those middle class people, and I'm trying to go up. According to the logic, can I go up and be another king or another queen?
No.
No, I cannot, right? Okay, let's go to the hierarchy of races. I am black, and according to the hierarchy of races and colors, people who are white are on the top, and then people who are yellow, and then people who are black. So, as a black individual at the bottom of the hierarchy, can I get married to a white girl on top?
No.
No. What happens to me if I do that? Is it going to go easy on everybody? No.
No.
Obviously, I'm going to be met with resistance, right? And it can be even deadly and fatal, right? Okay, so let's go to another kingdom where you have on top of the ladder or the hierarchy, you have a queen, okay? And then you have, of course, princes, you have ministers, and then you have people in the middle, and then you have low class people. So what happens if this queen decides she's not married? I mean, obviously she is a widow, and she's marriageable. She can get married, and she decides to get married to a low born, somebody from the low class. Is that acceptable?
No.
No. According to the logic of the time, according to the chain of being, the hierarchies that we have, you cannot do that. So the next thing would be, what is the reaction of society? Would people get away with it? No, they don't get
No.
away with it. They are normally punished, right? So the takeaway from here would be the idea that there is an established order and everybody should respect and honor this order. What happens if you challenge the order? You get punished for that. Okay? So this is actually what the whole idea is about, whether we're talking about Othello. Othello is a play that we're taking, and it represents the Renaissance, and it represents, uh, the Elizabethan age. And then we also have the Duchess of Malfi, which represents the Jacobean age. So when I say Othello, does it ring any bells? Have you heard or read or even watched Othello. That's fine. If you did not, that's fine. If you haven't, that's fine. So obviously you haven't, right? That's fine. Good. Okay. So let me again make it explicitly clear that Othello, or at the core of Othello and the Duchess of Malfi, you have this idea of established order and the fact that you cannot fight the system. And if you try to fight the system, you will lose big time. Okay? And in order to kind of, in order to communicate this idea of established order and the fact that people should respect and honor this respect, this kind of order, in order to kind of uh, um, tell people about those things and teach people about the virtues of maintaining this kind of order, you have uh, um, a dramatic framework that the dramatists of the time will use, which is called tragedy. So, tragedy is a technical term and it refers to those kinds of plays where big ideas, like the ideas and the idea of established order, are being discussed through people. People act and react in a certain way, and when you reflect on what they are doing, you get the message. The message is normally about the fate and the destiny of those who transgress against and challenge the established order and what happens to them. Um, let's take a 10-minute break, and when we come back, we continue with what a tragedy is and how those ideas are reflected and seen and manipulated in plays like the tragedies. So I'll see you in 10 minutes, inshallah. So I came back. Are you back, everyone?
Welcome, doctor.
Yes.
Okay, good. So what do you think? Interesting? Mm, yeah, let's take it one step at a time. We're not going to associate the. I have a class, unfortunately. Okay. Um, we're not going to associate the Middle Ages with tragedy. Well, with the Middle Ages, it's all about morality plays and mystery plays, and these are genres in themselves and on their own merits. When we talk about tragedy, we talk about the Renaissance, and we also talk about the Greeks because the Greeks are the ones who invented, and then of course I don't mean modern Greeks, I mean ancient Greeks. I mean people who lived during the time of people like Plato, Aristotle, and Socrates, people like Aeschylus and Euripides and others. So again, and Sophocles, of course. Again, we're talking about two types of tragedy. We're talking about Greek tragedy, and we're talking about Elizabethan or Shakespearean tragedy. But we shouldn't be referring to medieval tragedy because there wasn't none. Um, Again, we're talking about the tragedy as a technical framework within which ideas will be uh, molded, ideas will be presented and uh, discussed. So let's talk about this framework that we call tragedy, whether it is Greek tragedy or Elizabethan Shakespearean tragedy, because they have a lot in common. The only difference, perhaps, would be the idea that with Greek tragedy, because those were pagan individuals, people who has more they have what we call polytheism. Polytheism means تعدد الآلهة, the fact that their religion would allow and permit more than one god. They worship so many gods, and I think you're familiar. And I think you're familiar with Greek mythology, where you have gods and goddesses fighting and everything. We'll have something about Greek mythology perhaps later. So this is one way of looking at the world, and Greek tragedy got affected by it, this idea or this atmosphere of polytheism. The Elizabethan age has also its kind of tragedy, but this tragedy or this kind of or this brand of tragedy is or takes into consideration that this is a Christian society which believes in one God. They have monotheism. They are monotheistic, which means that they believe in one God. The idea with Greek tragedy was that you have those gods interfering, and those gods have anthropomorphic uh, tendencies. They hate and they like and they love like human beings. So it was only natural that sometimes they don't interfere in the best interest of human beings. Sometimes they even, uh, um, kind of hunt human beings. This is an idea that Christians wouldn't accept in the Elizabethan age. That's why their brand of tragedy does not have this kind of conflict between the gods and the human being. You have normally the conflict in Elizabethan tragedies is between the human being and social forces beyond this individual's control. Like when we talk about traditions, when we talk about um, a system of government. So this is the difference. We're focused more on Elizabethan and Shakespearean tragedy, where, um, or perhaps this is how it goes. You normally have those kinds of tragedies featuring um, a human being who is noble, who is exceptional, talented, and he can be a king or a prince. He can be a talented individual, a military leader, and he is noble and everything, and well loved and well liked by people. But somehow he has a flaw within his character, and this flaw and this weakness within his character kind of prompts him to do a number of errors, and one of those errors is fatal and deadly. And because of this error, he falls at the end of the play. He gets killed. So this is the trajectory of the Elizabethan tragic hero, which we normally see in any Greek tragedy. So you have an exceptional character that somehow is put in a situation where he makes errors and mistakes and he pays for them at the end. Um, Again, you normally have moral lessons, kind of thrown here and there in the tragedy. You normally have those feelings of pity and fear. One of the aims of a tragedy, whether it is Elizabethan or Greek, is the idea of purgation or the cleansing of excessive emotions and feelings. So people in ancient Greece and also in the Elizabethan age are or were under the impression that because of the so many uh, um, issues that we have in our daily life, people get emotionally intense. They have excessive feelings. They are tired. They are emotionally drained, and they need some kind of. They want to vent this. They want to give expression to these feelings so that they can get relieved. They can get cleansed of those negative feelings and emotions. And Greek tragedy and Elizabethan tragedy was meant to purge people of those excessive feelings. And they gave those feelings names. They say basically because it's a tragedy, we have those feelings of pity and fear. So you get so emotionally engaged in what happens in the play. You get emotionally engaged with what happens to the tragic hero because he is exceptional. And you start to feel pity and fear. Pity because you're taking pity on this guy because he's a human being after all. He's like us. And because you know that he is good, except for this flaw or error of judgment. This is pity. And fear, you also feel fearful of the prospect that you may be like him. You may be put in a position or in a situation where you have to make the same error or mistake and meet the same fate, which is death at the end. So this is called catharsis. tathir. They call it in Arabic tathir, where you get cleansed and relieved and purged of your feelings, excessive as they are, through those feelings of pity and fear. Pity because you're taking pity on the tragic hero, and fear because you think that you're a human, you're a vulnerable human being like this tragic hero, and you may be trapped, and you may fall into the same trap and meet the same end, which is death, tragic death. This is the tragedy, and this is the whole mark of the tragedy. The idea that you have a conflict within the tragedy, you have a conflict between the tragic hero and forces beyond his control. Again, they could be traditions, they could be family, they could be other rivals, people who doesn't or do not want what is good for you. So you have this kind of conflict that does not end well, does not end in favor of the tragic hero, unfortunately. So this is uh, the background that I want you to keep in mind when we discuss Othello and when we discuss the Duchess of Malfi. So my question again is about Othello. And what I want you to do, and because I don't intend, we still have time, I'm not going to leave, and I'm not going to spoil the plot for you. I want you to go now and use one of the AI generative models. It could be Gemini, for example, ChatGPT, or even Claude. And I would like you to uh, write a prompt about Othello, right? Tell me about Othello. Give me the plot of Othello, and let's see what will come out. So in order to do that, I'll give you 5 long minutes. I want you to tell me what Othello is about in 5 minutes. Yalla. Mm. Right. They are doing something. They are doing some research on Othello for 5 minutes. Good. Any luck? Lots of luck? Can we talk about it? Okay, let's talk about the plot of Othello. Can somebody come to the mic and share what Othello is all about in terms of plot? Hmm. Hello, Othello, everyone.
Yes, doctor.
Yeah. So how much do we know about Othello now?
Oh, a little bit. Yes, more.
Hmm. Okay. Can we share what we now know about Othello?
Okay, do I read the AI version, a little bit of it? Or
Is
no,
it
I
long?
explain.
Is it
Oh,
long?
a little bit, because that I will just take the main.
Yeah, take the main.
Okay, Othello is the main character in a famous tragedy play written by William Shakespeare around 1063. The tragedy happened because of a man named Lego. Lego hates
Iago, Iago,
Oh,
Iago,
Alec
Iago.
Iago.
Mm.
Iago hates Othello and wants to destroy him. He starts a clever plan to make Othello believe that his wife, this Desdemon, Desdemona,
Desdemona.
Desdemona, is having an affair with another soldier named
Cassio.
Cassio. Yeah.
Okay.
Uh, yeah,
That's
that's
good.
it. Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
Okay. Thank you, Tala. Thank you so much. Any other ideas about Othello? We're primarily focused on the plot. What happened, when, and where. We'll talk about the why later. I mean, the whole idea is about the why, and obviously, this is something that we'll cover uh, next time. Hmm. Any other ideas about Othello? Because I don't want to spoil it for you. Okay, right. So let me tell you what I intend to do. I would like you to do more research about Othello and the play that will come after it, which is The Duchess of Malfi. So, Othello and the Duchess of Malfi. I would like you to do some research. I mean, I would like you to know more about the plot. So, this is what you're going to tell me about next time. The plot of both plays, Othello and the Duchess of Malfi. This is number one. Uh, Number two, we're going to talk more about how those plays fit the framework of tragedy. Remember, we spoke about tragedy and its trajectory, the exceptional tragic hero, and what happens. Okay, so I would like you to tell me whether Othello, you think Othello is a tragic hero, in the tragic sense that we referred to, whether the Duchess of Malfi is a tragic heroine. And remember how we started? We spoke about the idea of hierarchies. The fact that in life you have different hierarchies where you have people on top and then you have people in the middle and you have people at the base. So I would like you to tell me what kind of hierarchy we had or have in Othello. Is it a hierarchy of color or race, or is it a hierarchy, or is it a chain of B? And then you go to the Duchess of Malfi and tell me whether it's a hierarchy of color or a hierarchy of rank, where you have people on top, you have people at the bottom. And I would like you to tell me what transgression is happening, what violation is being committed, خرق لهذا established order, and by whom, and what happens to those transgressors at the end of each of these two plays. Okay, is that clear, everyone?
Yes.
Okay,
Yes.
so this is what I want you to engage yourself with. We have, by the way, we have a whole playlist on the on the course. I have so many you know, recordings from previous semesters, and I also have AI generated you know, short videos of the different aspects of the course. But I'm not going to reveal that to you or share that with you until next time, until you have done your own research. Again, Othello, the Duchess of Malfi, the plot, and whether you think those two plays, I mean, if we can call them tragedies, and if we can call their main characters tragic heroes and heroines, and what is it that they did, the transgression and violation that they did, so that they deserve the bad and nasty end that they had at the end, the tragic end at the end. Okay, everyone? Is that clear?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. So we're going to stop on this note and with this item, and I'll see you next week, inshallah. Salam alaikum, everyone.
عليكم السلام.
Bye bye.
Awesome.